They told me they had been watching my work for over a year, tracking my progress, while my own parents could not even remember my major. I was sitting on a cold metal chair in a completely deserted university auditorium, clutching a degree that had cost me 8 years of sleepless nights and grueling labor. While other graduates celebrated with their families, my phone remained silent because my parents had abandoned me for my brother yet again. Little did I know, their absence that day was not just a matter of neglect, but part of a calculated plan to destroy my future. My name is Clara Vance, and at 31 years old, I had spent my entire life existing as a ghost in my own family home. My older brother Julian was the undisputed golden child who could do no wrong, despite failing at literally everything he ever attempted. My father Arthur gladly financed Julian's endless stream of abandoned business ventures, while my mother Beatrice excused every disaster as mere bad luck. Meanwhile, my perfect grades were ignored, leaving me to realize very early that my achievements meant absolutely nothing in their eyes. When I declared my dream of studying aerospace engineering, my mother openly mocked my intelligence and told me to choose something far more realistic. Undeterred, I secretly enrolled in a local community college, working long day shifts as a grocery cashier just to fund my tuition. It took me nearly a decade to transition to a state university, balancing brutal night shifts at a shipping dock with early morning engineering lectures. I survived on 4 hours of sleep a night. Yet my parents refused to spare even $50 for my textbooks because Julian needed another massive handout. During my final semester, my senior design professor quietly submitted my research on advanced thermodynamics to a prestigious national engineering forum without my knowledge. A few weeks before graduation, he began asking strange questions about whether any major technology firms had tried to contact me privately. I was far too exhausted from working 80 hours a week to think much of his odd behavior, focusing entirely on my upcoming graduation day. I desperately hoped that seeing me walk across that stage would finally force my parents to acknowledge my worth. When I invited them months in advance, my mother casually dismissed the milestone, explaining that they were entirely consumed with solving Julian's latest financial catastrophe. 2 days before the ceremony, she officially canceled, claiming they had to attend a legal meeting to protect Julian from a massive lawsuit. Hearing her say that family always comes first made me realize, with painful clarity, that I was never actually considered part of their family. I sat through the beautiful ceremony completely alone, watching other parents weep with pride while my designated row of seats remained entirely empty. After the crowd dispersed, I retreated to the back of the auditorium to gather my thoughts before my next grueling warehouse shift. That was when two impeccably dressed men in tailored suits approached me, identifying themselves as senior partners from a multi-billion-dollar aerospace conglomerate called Vanguard Systems. They praised my published research papers and immediately presented me with a 5-year executive contract worth over $8 million in salary and stock options. Looking at that life-changing document, I realized my years of silent suffering were finally over, and I smiled for the first time in years. When I returned to my cramped apartment, my mother called, not to congratulate me, but to tell me she had lied to my relatives about my graduation to avoid embarrassment. I calmly corrected her, revealing that I had not only graduated, but had also just signed a historic contract with a major tech giant. Instead of expressing pride, she immediately accused me of being scammed and suggested that I should share any potential money with Julian. I hung up the phone with a bitter laugh, realizing they only valued my existence when my hard work could be converted into cash for my brother. 3 days later, my parents unexpectedly showed up at my apartment, pretending to be overjoyed while immediately demanding a $100,000 loan to save Julian. When I firmly refused to fund his lifestyle, my mother instantly turned cold, launching a smear campaign that painted me as a selfish and ungrateful daughter to the entire extended family. My grandmother, Evelyn, called me a week later to investigate the sudden drama, warning me never to sign any documents my parents presented. She cryptically hinted that my mother was desperately trying to secure a massive inheritance that depended entirely on Julian's success. Shortly after starting my dream job at Vanguard Systems, I received an urgent confidential email from a prestigious estate attorney regarding my late grandfather's private trust. The lawyer, Thomas Vance, requested an immediate private meeting and explicitly warned me not to mention the appointment to my parents or my brother. He revealed that my grandfather, who had passed away over a decade ago, had anticipated my parents' cruelty and had taken extraordinary measures to protect me. My grandfather had quietly hired private investigators to document my family's behavior long before his passing. In the attorney's quiet office, I learned that my grandfather had established a $14 million trust with incredibly strict conditions for distribution. The entire fortune was designated to go solely to the grandchild, who achieved complete financial independence without any parental assistance before turning 32. Furthermore, any parent caught actively sabotaging a grandchild's career or education would be permanently stripped of their right to manage the estate. Thomas then played a heartbreaking voice recording of my grandfather, expressing his immense pride in my strength and explaining why he had to protect me from the shadows. The private investigator's thick files revealed a horrifying history of betrayal, proving that my mother had spent years actively destroying my opportunities. When I was 22, she had forged a letter to a scholarship committee accusing me of academic dishonesty, costing me a full ride. Years later, she lied to an aunt who had offered to pay for my certifications, claiming I had dropped out and moved away. My mother had systematically blocked every path to success I tried to build, all to ensure Julian remained the only successful child in the family. My grandmother eventually agreed to stand by my side and expose the truth at the mandatory family meeting required for the trust distribution. We gathered in the grand conference room of the law firm, where my parents and Julian assumed they were finally receiving their massive inheritance. Thomas Vance calmly read the strict terms of the trust before playing my grandfather's recorded voice, causing my mother's face to drain of all color. The attorney then distributed copies of the investigator's files, documenting every single lie and forged letter my mother had created. My father stared at the evidence in absolute horror, demanding to know how my mother could write fake letters to destroy her own daughter's education. My mother wept hysterically, screaming that she did everything to protect Julian because I was strong enough to survive without the family's help. Julian was utterly devastated to learn that his entire life had been financed by the systematic destruction of his sister's dreams. The attorney formally declared my parents and Julian disqualified from the trust, awarding the entire $14 million estate to me, effective immediately. Julian apologized to me before walking out of the room, admitting he had been too self-absorbed to notice how much I was struggling. The next day, my father called me in tears, confessing that he had been too weak to stand up to my mother, but promised to seek help. I told him I was willing to try to forgive him, but I needed space to heal from the decades of neglect. I visited my grandfather's grave to leave his favorite flowers, weeping not out of sadness, but out of deep gratitude for the man who had loved me from afar. Today, I am 32 years old, leading a brilliant team of aerospace engineers and living in a beautiful home with a quiet, thriving garden. My grandmother and I share dinner every single weekend, keeping my grandfather's memory alive through stories of his kindness and wisdom. I have finally learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by the people who choose to see you, support you, and love you unconditionally. Thank you for listening to my journey, and if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel for more life lessons.